In the summer of 1945, the war in Europe was over, but the Pacific was still burning. Germany had fallen, leaving Japan to fight a brutal war of attrition. Their military leadership was driven by a strict martial code that viewed surrender as a disgrace, demanding its citizens choose death over defeat. Despite severe American naval blockades cutting off essential supplies and waves of B-29 bombers turning Japanese cities to ash with firebombs, the civilian population remained entirely mobilized. Men, women, and children were prepared to fight to the bitter end. On the other side of the world, scientists in the New Mexico desert were finalizing the American countermeasure, the Manhattan Project. This highly classified scientific endeavor was racing to build a weapon powerful enough to force an immediate and absolute end to the conflict. The stage was set for a terrifying collision. On one side, an island nation mobilized for total sacrifice. On the other, an empire armed with a world-ending weapon. A catastrophe of devastating scale was now locked in place. Enter Tsutomu Yamaguchi, a 23-year-old engineer. In early August 1945, Yamaguchi was sent on a routine business trip to the city of Hiroshima. The residents of Hiroshima considered themselves lucky. While Tokyo and Osaka burned, their city remained largely untouched by major air raids. But this was a calculated military decision. The U.S. military deliberately spared Hiroshima to serve as a pristine testing ground to measure the exact effectiveness of their new weapon. Yamaguchi had no idea he was stepping directly onto the bullseye of that test. He was about to become the only officially recognized person in history to survive two separate atomic bomb blasts. At 8:15 a.m. on the clear morning of August 6th, an American B-29 bomber named the Enola Gay breached the skies over Hiroshima. Sleeping in its bomb bay was a 4-ton uranium-based nuclear weapon dubbed Little Boy. It dropped from the plane, plummeting for 43 agonizing seconds. Rather than hitting the ground, the bomb was engineered to explode in midair at exactly 1,900 feet to ensure maximum destructive radius. A blinding flash was immediately followed by a 700-mile-per-hour supersonic shockwave, flattening 90% of buildings within 2 kilometers. The immediate aftermath brought flesh-melting heat, reaching millions of degrees at the core. Soon after, a sticky, radioactive black rain, a toxic mixture of ash, dust, and nuclear material, began to fall on the survivors. Within seconds, 80,000 people were dead. Yet, miraculously, Tsutomu Yamaguchi survived the initial strike. Thrown into a potato patch by the shockwave, he suffered severe burns and ruptured eardrums, stumbling into a world of total ruin. In Tokyo, officials faced an absolute communication blackout from Hiroshima. Even as reports of complete devastation filtered in, military hardliners refused to comprehend the true nature of the American weapon, rejecting any thought of surrender. Meanwhile, a heavily bandaged and traumatized Yamaguchi managed to board a refugee train fleeing the ashes. He traveled back to his hometown, arriving on August 9th. His destination was Nagasaki. That same morning, a second American bomber took to the sky, carrying Fat Man. This was a radically different device, a plutonium-based implosion bomb that was significantly more powerful than the uranium weapon dropped on Hiroshima. At 11 a.m., Yamaguchi stood in his Nagasaki office, desperately trying to explain the sheer scale of the Hiroshima blast to his skeptical supervisor. His boss told him he was crazy, that one bomb couldn't destroy an entire city. Then the room lit up with a blinding white flash. This map illustrates the geographical constraint of the second blast. While Fat Man was the stronger weapon, Nagasaki's surrounding mountainous topography acted as a physical barrier. The peaks trapped the expanding energy, severely limiting the blast's outward spread compared to the flat plains of Hiroshima. The energy was contained, but it concentrated the absolute destruction within the Urukomi Valley, obliterating Nagasaki's industrial heart. Astonishingly, buried under the rubble of his office, Yamaguchi survived a second ground zero, testing the very limits of human endurance. The twin atomic bombings, combined with a sudden and massive Soviet invasion of Manchuria, broke the deadlock in Tokyo. Recognizing that continued fighting meant total annihilation, Emperor Hirohito intervened, breaking centuries of imperial tradition to force an end to the fighting. On August 15th, citizens gathered around their radios to hear the emperor's dual voice broadcast, the first time the Japanese public had ever heard their ruler speak. Weeks later, the formal surrender was signed on the deck of the USS Missouri, closing the deadliest conflict in human history. But for the survivors of the blasts, the dying didn't stop with the peace treaty. A new word entered the Japanese language, hibakusha, meaning explosion-affected people. They faced an invisible continuation of the attack. Radiation from the fallout caused severe illnesses for decades, leading to spikes in leukemia, unknown cancers, and birth defects. On top of their severe physical scars, the hibakusha were heavily ostracized in society, viewed with deep fear and stigma by their fellow citizens. Today, Hiroshima and Nagasaki stand as global centers for nuclear disarmament. Their modern peace parks have transformed former ground zeros into landscapes of tranquil water and greenery, dedicated to ensuring the 1945 tragedy is never repeated. Tsutomu Yamaguchi spent his later years as a vocal advocate against nuclear proliferation. Until his passing in 2010, he used the unique, agonizing distinction of surviving 2 atomic bombs to warn future generations of what these weapons actually do to flesh and bone. Modern science gave us the capacity to erase hundreds of thousands of lives in an instant, but the endurance of these 2 cities and the persistent voices of the hibakusha offer a permanent, sobering plea to the world. Never again.